400
Before we
guests,
continue,
crystal
I believe a
chandeliers,
toast is in
a
order.
pregnant woman in midnight
begin
blue
to
standing
agree,
6 feet
Claire?
from her husband as he leaned into the microphone and called her worthless, not in private, not in anger, in public, deliberately, with a smile on his face. She did not scream, she did not cry, she did not run, but her father stood up. And what happened next, nobody in that ballroom ever forgot it. Here is what her husband did not know. While he was rehearsing that speech, she had already found the credit card statements. The hotel 11 miles from home on the night he said he was in Boston. The jewelry receipt for a bracelet she never received. The file on his laptop where he had been documenting her tears. Every sleepless night, every question, every moment of vulnerability. Building a case to take her unborn daughter away from her. He thought he married a quiet woman. He married a Hargrove. And in 60 days, in front of 600 witnesses, he would learn exactly what that meant. Stay with me. Because the twist at the end of this story, nobody saw coming. Not even her. The lesson this story carries: when someone calls you worthless, that is not a fact. That is a confession. A confession that they have nothing left to offer you. Your worth was never theirs to define. If this story moved something inside you, hit the like button right now. Leave a comment telling me which moment hit you hardest. Share this with one woman in your life who needs to hear it today. Someone who has been made to feel small. Someone who forgot how powerful she is. And if you are new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. Every single week we bring you stories about women who rise. Make sure you are here for the next one.
400 guests, crystal chandeliers, a pregnant woman in a midnight blue gown standing 6 feet from her husband as he leaned into the microphone and called her worthless. She did not scream, she did not cry, she did not run, but her father stood up. Walter Hargrove, self-made billionaire, the kind of man who never raises his voice because he has never needed to. He walked to that podium with the calm of someone who has already decided how this ends. And what he did next? No one in that ballroom will ever forget it. But here's what Colin did not know. His wife had already found the credit card statements. The hotel charges 12 miles from their home. The forged signature on a $300,000 loan. The file on his laptop where he had been documenting her tears to steal custody of their unborn daughter. He thought he married a quiet woman. He married a Hargrove, and Hargrove women do not break. They transform. This is the story of Claire Hargrove, a woman who was called worthless by the man who was supposed to love her most, and how she became the most dangerous person in the room. Stay until the end, because the moment her father speaks at that second gala will leave you speechless. And the twist in the final 10 minutes, nobody saw coming. Not even Claire. Before we begin, I want to share something real. When someone calls you worthless, that is not a fact. That is a confession. A confession that they have nothing left to offer you. And the most powerful thing you will ever do is refuse to let someone else's smallness become the ceiling of your own life. If this story touches something real inside you, leave a comment and tell me which moment hit you hardest. Share it with a woman who needs to hear it today. Now, let us begin. The Grand Monarch Hotel, Hartford, Connecticut, September 14th. Claire Hargrove Mercer was 7 months pregnant and wearing midnight blue because her father said it was her color. The color of deep water, of things that hold more than they show. She stood near the edge of the stage, with one hand resting on her belly. The baby had been kicking since they arrived, restless, as if she already knew something her mother had not yet learned. Claire had spent 45 minutes that afternoon trying to zip a gown over a belly the size of a basketball, finally surrendering and letting her mother, Diane, do it. Diane had stepped back, tilted her head, and said, "You look magnificent, like a ship in full sail. Claire had stared at her. That is genuinely the least romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. Diane had patted her hand. Darling, ships in full sail are the most powerful things on the ocean. Clary had not understood it then. She would. Colin Mercer stood at the podium in his best charcoal suit, a glass of scotch Intrépide in his right hand, a smile on his face that did not quite reach his eyes. He had been giving the annual toast, honoring Walter's charitable legacy. The speech a devoted son-in-law delivers when 400 wealthy donors are watching. It was supposed to be gracious, warm, brief. Instead, Colin veered off script. "My wife," he said, swirling his drink. He let the word hang there and something in his tone shifted. The particular register of a man who wants an audience for something he knows is wrong. Claire? She is many things. Beautiful? Sure. Educated? Absolutely. He chuckled, glancing at the crowd. But let us be honest tonight, among friends. Without her daddy's money? He paused, smiled wider. She would be worthless. The word landed like a slap, not a gasp. Something worse. Silence. The kind of silence that happens when 400 people simultaneously hold their breath and look anywhere except at the pregnant woman standing 6 feet from the podium. Claire's fingers tightened on the edge of the table, the white linen tablecloth bunched under her grip. The microphone fed back a high, thin screech that matched the sound inside her chest, the sound of something breaking that would never fit back together the same way. She looked across the ballroom, past the tuxedos and evening gowns, past the ice sculptures, past the flower arrangements that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She found her father, Walter Hargrove, 63 years old, silver-haired, in a perfectly tailored navy suit. He had not moved, had not flinched. His napkin was still folded on his lap. His water glass was still in his right hand. He was looking at Colin the way a man looks at something he has already decided to remove from existence. That stillness. Claire knew it well. Walter Hargrove only went still when he was about to dismantle something completely. She had watched him do it in boardrooms, watched him do it when a business partner tried to cheat him out of $8 million, watched him go perfectly, terrifyingly quiet, and then make one single move that ended everything. He set down his water glass, smoothed his tie, stood. The room tracked him like a single organism. Every head turned, every conversation stopped. Walter walked toward the podium without hurrying. Every step was measured, deliberate. The sound of his leather shoes on the marble floor was the only sound in the entire ballroom. Click, click, click. He reached the stage, climbed the 3 steps, stood beside his son-in-law. He was 2 inches shorter than Colin, but somehow occupied twice the space. He reached out and gently, almost tenderly, took the microphone from Colin's hand. The way you take scissors from a child, not angry, just certain. "My son-in-law," Walter said, and his voice was warm, conversational, as though they were chatting over coffee on a Sunday morning. "Calls my daughter worthless." He paused, let the word hang in the chandelier light. Interesting choice of words from a man whose entire net worth fits comfortably in my coat pocket. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Someone near the back coughed. Walter smiled. The smile that had built a $2.8 billion real estate empire from a $20,000 loan and a 1-room office in Bridgeport. But we will discuss that privately. Tonight is about the children this foundation serves. Children who need hospitals. Children who need books. Children who need someone to tell them they have worth. He reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a checkbook, wrote a number, held it up. $2 million, Additional, tonight, for the Children's Literacy Wing. The room erupted. Applause crashed like a wave. Standing ovation. Walter had redirected 400 people's attention in under 90 seconds. He handed the microphone to the event coordinator, nodded once, and walked back to his table. Colin stood on the stage alone, blinking. The applause was not for him. The spotlight had moved. He had been publicly neutralized without Walter Hargrove ever raising his voice. Here is something worth remembering. When someone humiliates you publicly, your instinct is to fight back immediately, to match their volume, their cruelty, their heat. But the most powerful response is rarely the loudest one. Sometimes the most devastating thing you can do is simply redirect the room. Give people something better to look at. Let the humiliation belong entirely to the person who created it. Claire did not see any of this clearly. She was already walking toward the hallway. She found the bathroom, pushed open the heavy oak door, walked past the marble sinks and the orchid arrangement and the basket of monogrammed hand towels, entered the last stall, locked it, sat down on the cold tile floor in her $3,000 gown. Her hand found her belly. The baby kicked, hard, right against her palm, as if she knew, as if she was saying, "I am here." I heard it too. "Your daddy just called us worthless, little one," Claire whispered, in front of everyone we know. She did not cry, not yet. The shock was too complete for tears. Tears require processing. And Claire did not understand anything right now except the cold tile beneath her and the warm life moving under her hand and the word worthless echoing in the space between her ribs. She pulled out her phone, opened his text from that morning, a photo of her sleeping, hair fanned across the pillow, morning light on her face. His caption, "You look beautiful. Cannot wait for tonight." She read it 3 times. The baby kicked again. Claire closed her eyes, pressed her back against the stall wall. Breathed. 3 minutes passed, maybe 5. She stood, smoothed her gown, unlocked the stall, washed her hands, because that is what you do. Checked her reflection. Same face, same diamond earrings her mother had clasped on 2 hours ago. Same woman who had walked into this gala, believing her husband loved her. She stepped into the hallway and froze. 20 feet away, near the coat check, Colin, his back to her, his hand on the lower back of a woman Claire had never seen before. Blonde, red dress, young, laughing at something he said. Colin leaned in close, too close, his lips near her ear. They did not see Claire, but Claire saw everything. The hand on the back, the lean, the laugh, the intimacy of the gesture, the kind of touch that does not happen between colleagues, the kind that has history behind it. Repetition, comfort. Claire stepped backward, quietly, into the shadow of the hallway, watched for 3 more seconds. Then she turned and walked away. Her heels made no sound on the carpet. The car ride home was 12 minutes of silence broken only by the soft hiss of tires on wet pavement. It had started raining. Of course it had. The universe has a terrible sense of timing. Colin drove, not drunk enough to slur, just drunk enough to be reckless. Claire sat in the passenger seat with her hands folded over her belly. The windshield wipers beat a rhythm that sounded like the word she could not stop hearing. Worthless, worthless, worthless. "You are quiet," Colin said. Claire stared at the rain streaking her window. Each droplet caught the street light and turned gold for a second before sliding away. "It was a joke, Claire," he sighed. The particular sigh of a man who has practiced making his wife feel unreasonable. "You are so sensitive lately. The hormones are—" Who was she? Not a question, a statement. Colin's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Just slightly. Just enough. Who was who? The blonde. Red dress. Your hand on her back, by the coat check. A beat of silence. The wipers swept left. Right left. She is nobody. A colleague from the firm. We were talking about a case. You were whispering in her ear. Claire. He used her full name. He only used her full name when he was about to make her feel crazy. I was talking in a loud hallway at a loud event. That is how people communicate in loud spaces. Can we not do this tonight? You are 7 months pregnant. You should be resting. His phone buzzed in the cup holder between them. The screen lit up. Claire saw the notification before Colin flipped the phone face down. One letter, R. They pulled into the driveway of their brownstone, the house Claire had bought with her trust fund, the house Colin called ours when friends visited and yours when they argued. He killed the engine, sat for a moment, then reached over and squeezed her hand. I am sorry about the speech. Too much scotch. I will call your dad tomorrow and apologize. Okay? His hand was warm. His eyes were soft. He looked exactly like the man she married. And that was the most terrifying thing. Because the man she married would not have said that word. The man she married would not have touched another woman's back like that. The man she married, she was beginning to understand, had never quite existed. Okay, Claire said. Because that was what she always said. They went inside. Colin disappeared into the guest room. His choice lately, he said he did not want to disturb her sleep. She used to believe that. Claire stood alone in the kitchen. The house pressed its quiet against her ears. She walked to Colin's home office. The door was ajar. She pushed it open. His desk was neat. Always neat. Colin was meticulous. Pins aligned, papers stacked, laptop centered, a man who controlled his environment because he could not control anything else. She tried the top drawer. Unlocked. Pens, sticky notes, a spare phone charger. She tried the second drawer. Locked. Claire went to the hallway closet, found his jacket from tonight. The pocket yielded a small brass key she had never seen before. How long had this drawer been locked? How long had she simply not noticed? Back in the office. Key in the lock. Turn. Click. Inside. Credit card statements. Not the card they shared. A different card. One she had never seen. Claire carried the papers to the kitchen table and spread them under the overhead light. Dinners for two. Restaurants she recognized. The ones Colin told her were client meetings. Fitzgerald's, the Blue Harbor, Café Laurent. Every entry showed 2 covers. Every date was a night he had said he was working late. A receipt from a jewelry store. $4,200. A bracelet. Claire touched her bare wrist. She had never received a bracelet. A hotel charge. The Langham. December 14th. The night Colin said he had flown to Boston for a conference. Claire pulled up the hotel's address on her phone. 11 miles from their house. He had not gone to Boston. He had gone 11 miles and lied about 300. Her knees buckled. She grabbed the edge of the kitchen table, lowered herself into a chair. I am not crazy. I know what I saw tonight, and now I know what I have been missing for months. The baby shifted inside her, a slow roll, left to right, as if turning away from the truth, too. Claire picked up her phone. 1:17 in the morning. She dialed her best friend. Sophie. 1 ring, 2 rings. Click. Claire? Sophie's voice was groggy but alert. Best friends answer at 1 in the morning. That is the unspoken contract that separates best friends from everyone else. I found something, Claire said. She was surprised by how steady her voice was. Credit card statements. A hotel 11 miles from here, on a night he said he was in Boston. Dinners for 2 at every restaurant he called a client meeting. A bracelet I never received. Silence. Not the thinking kind, The guilty kind. Sophie. More silence. Sophie, you are not saying anything. She heard Sophie inhale, a long shaking breath, the kind you take before you confess something that will ruin everything. I did not know for sure, Claire. Sophie's voice cracked. But I saw them together 2 months ago, at Café Laurent, corner table, his hand on hers. I left before they noticed. I wanted to tell you, I have been trying to find the right moment. Claire hung up. She set the phone on the table, face down, precisely in the center, the way Colin placed his laptop. And she sat there in the kitchen of the house she had bought, at the table where she had told Colin she was finally pregnant after 2 years of trying. Wearing the gown she had chosen for a night that was supposed to celebrate her father's legacy. 2 months. Sophie had known for 2 months. 2 betrayals in one night. Her husband, her best friend. Claire looked down at her belly. The baby was quiet now, sleeping, unaware that the architecture of her family was collapsing around her while she dreamed. Claire pressed her palms flat on the table, felt the solid wood grain beneath her fingers. Real. Something she could trust. Okay. She whispered to no one. She did not know what that word meant yet, but she said it anyway, because sometimes okay is not a statement of fact. It is a decision to keep breathing when everything in your body tells you to stop. Morning came the way mornings do when you have not slept. Not gradually, all at once. The kitchen filled with gray light, and Claire was still at the table. The credit card statements spread in front of her. The coffee she had made at 4 a.m. gone cold in its mug, bitter, like everything else. She heard Colin's footsteps on the stairs, the creak of the 3rd step, the shuffle of slippers on hardwood. He appeared in the kitchen doorway in a t-shirt and sweatpants, slightly tousled, hungover but functional. He poured himself coffee without noticing hers was untouched. Morning. I was thinking we could do brunch at the club. Weather is supposed to clear. Claire studied his face. The way you study a painting you have just discovered is a forgery. The brushstrokes look the same. The colors are right. But now that you know, you can see where the hand wavered, where the lie lives in the details. Sure, Claire said. Brunch sounds nice. She swept the credit card statements into her purse while he was not looking, smiled when he kissed the top of her head on his way to the shower, watched him go. Then she drove to her parents' estate. The Hargrove property sat on 12 acres in Glastonbury. Stone walls, iron gates, a half-mile driveway lined with oak trees that turned gold in October. Claire had grown up here, had fallen off her bicycle on this gravel and run crying to her father, who picked her up and said, "Hargrove girls, fall down, sweetheart. Then they get back up." She found Walter in his study, mahogany desk, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, the leather chair that had molded to his shape over 30 years. The grandfather clock in the corner, ticking its steady, patient rhythm. Walter looked up when she entered, set down his glasses, said nothing. He already knew why she was there. Claire placed the credit card statements on his desk. Walter put his glasses back on, read each one slowly, methodically, the way he read contracts. When he finished, he folded his glasses, set them on the desk, aligned them with the edge, a habit Claire had inherited from him, the need for order when everything else is chaos. "What do you want to do?" he said. Not what he would do, not what she should do, what she wanted to do. This was how Walter had always raised her, to make her own choices, to own her own decisions. He gave her the tools and the space, and then he waited, even now. Even when every fatherly instinct must have been screaming at him to destroy, Colin Mercer with a single phone call. "I do not know yet," Claire said. "Take your time," Walter said. The grandfather clock ticked. Outside, the gardener's shears clipped the hedges. A safe sound. A normal sound. "He has been cheating on me," she said. "At least 18 months, maybe longer." "I know," Walter said quietly. Claire opened her eyes. "You know? I suspected after the gala last night. I made a phone call this morning. A man who calls his pregnant wife worthless in public has something larger to hide. Cruelty that bold is always covering something." He paused. "I am sorry I was right. That afternoon, while Colin was at the gym, or wherever he actually went when he said he was at the gym, Claire returned home. His phone sat on the kitchen counter, charging face up. It buzzed. A text notification. From RBW. Claire picked up the phone. Colin did not use a passcode. He never had. The confidence of a man who believed he was smarter than everyone around him. The message was still visible on the screen. "Last night was too close. She almost saw us. We need to be more careful. Missing you already." Claire's throat tightened, but her hands did not shake. Something had shifted inside her since the cold bathroom tile the night before. The grief had begun to harden into something else. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, clearer. The beginning of a plan she did not yet have words for. She photographed the text. Then, because the phone was unlocked, she scrolled through his messages with RRW Rachel Webb. She found the full name in his contacts. Junior associate at his firm, 28 years old, the woman in the red dress. Dozens of messages. Hundreds. Going back 14 months. Pet names, plans, promises. She photographed everything. Then she opened his email and found something far worse than an affair. Colin had been corresponding with a divorce attorney named Philip Garrett, specializing in high net worth separations. The emails went back 7 months. Colin was not just cheating, he was planning to leave her, but not before securing his financial claim through the baby. Custody arguments, community property leverage, paternal rights, as a vehicle to access Hargrove family trusts. Every email was calculated, strategic, cold, and then, in a folder labeled simply CL, Claire found the file that broke her open completely. A document titled Behavior Log. Dates, incidents, quotes taken grotesquely out of context. October 3rd. Claire became hysterical over a missed dinner reservation. Significant emotional dysregulation. November 17th. Claire crying again. 3rd episode this week. Unstable baseline. January 9th. Claire accused me of lying about work trip. Paranoid ideation. Possible prenatal depression. He had been documenting her emotional responses during pregnancy. Every tear, every question, every sleepless night. Building a case that she was mentally unfit. Manufacturing evidence to take her daughter. And she had been helping him do it. Every argument she had started because something felt wrong, documented. Every night she had wandered the house because she could not sleep, noted. Every time she had asked where he had been and he had called her paranoid, recorded. He was making her look unstable, and she had been handing him the ammunition with both hands. This is the moment in a story like this that I want you to hold on to. When you discover that someone has been systematically undermining you, every instinct says to confront them immediately, to demand answers, to make them see what they have done. But confrontation before preparation gives the advantage back to the person who has been planning against you. The most powerful position is this, knowing everything while they think you know nothing. Patience is not weakness. Patience in moments like these is the only weapon that actually works. Claire set the phone down exactly where she had found it. Same angle, same position, wiped her fingerprints with her sleeve. The shower started upstairs. Colin was home. She had not heard him come in. She sat at the kitchen table, folded her hands, and waited for him to come downstairs so she could smile at him across the dinner she was about to cook. Because the most dangerous thing a woman can do when she discovers the full truth is pretend she has not. The forensic accountant's name was Margaret Holloway, 51 years old, silver-haired, the kind of woman who had spent 3 decades finding money that men had tried to hide and felt no particular emotion about it, just the clean satisfaction of mathematics meeting justice. She sat across from Walter and Claire in the offices of Peterson and Cole on a Tuesday morning, 5 days after the gala. "Your husband has been systematic," Margaret said. She laid out spreadsheets on the conference table, color-coded, highlighted, annotated. Over the past 16 months, he has made 97 separate transfers from your joint household account to a personal account you are not named on. Each transfer was under $2,000, small enough to avoid triggering bank alerts. The total is $79,400. Claire stared at the numbers, each one a dinner she thought they had shared, a weekend she thought was real, a life she thought she understood. "But that is not the worst of it," Margaret said. She slid another document across the table. "6 months ago, your husband took a loan of $300,000 from a man named Victor Crane." David Peterson, the family attorney, leaned forward. "Victor Crane is a predatory lender. He operates on the edge of legality. His targets are over-leveraged men married into wealth. When they default, and they always default, Crane uses co-guarantee documents to pursue claims against the family assets. He has done this 9 times in the past decade. The loan paperwork," Margaret said, "lists your husband's expected inheritance through marriage as collateral." Claire read the line, then read it again. Expected inheritance through marriage, her family's wealth, her father's life's work, reduced to collateral on a loan from a predator. "There is a supplementary document," Margaret said. She slid it across. A co-guarantee form bearing Claire's signature. Claire looked at the signature, her name, her handwriting. Almost. The C was wrong. Claire always looped her C. This one was angular, sharp, close enough to fool a lender, not looking carefully, not close enough to fool the woman whose name it was. "I did not sign this," Claire said. "We know," David replied. "That is forgery, a federal offense." Walter had not spoken throughout the presentation. Now he put on his reading glasses, reviewed every document one more time, then removed them and set them on the table. He took out his phone and made 3 calls. The first to David. Prepare everything, divorce filing, asset protection, criminal referral. The second to Margaret. Complete trace on Victor Crane, every entity, every connection. The third he took in another room. Claire did not hear it. When he returned, something in his eyes had sharpened. The look of a man who had identified a problem and already designed the solution. "He made one mistake," Walter said quietly. "He forgot whose daughter you are." Claire spent the next 10 days becoming the wife Colin expected. Warm, compliant, unsuspecting. She cooked his favorite meals, laughed at his jokes, complimented his tie on the way out the door. Each kindness was a brick in a wall he could not see. Each smile was a lock on a door he did not know was closing. Behind the scenes, everything moved with precision. David filed sealed divorce papers. Claire moved her personal assets into a prenatal trust for the baby, co-signed by Walter, supervised by David. The trust was ironclad. Colin would have no claim. The forensic accountant flagged the unauthorized transfers. The criminal complaint moved through the federal prosecutor's office. Forgery, fraud, wire fraud related to the loan documentation. And then, 10 days after the gala, the first piece of unexpected news arrived. David called on a Thursday evening. His voice was careful, measured, the voice of a man delivering something complicated. "Claire, Rachel Webb came to my office this afternoon. Voluntarily, she says she ended the relationship with Colin 3 days ago, and she wants to cooperate." Claire gripped the phone. "Cooperate how?" "She is prepared to provide a full statement. Texts, emails, dates. She says she did not know about the behavior log. When she found out Colin was documenting your emotional responses to build a custody case, that was her line. She has a younger sister who went through a vicious custody battle. She wants to help." Claire sat in silence for a long moment. "Is she credible?" "Her documentation is extensive, combined with what we already have. The forgery, the financial fraud, the behavior log. We have enough to proceed." "Colin is finished, Claire." David paused. "It is over. It is over." Claire set down the phone, walked to the nursery, pale yellow walls, white crib, a mobile of silver stars catching the evening light. She stood in the doorway and let herself feel, for the first time in 2 weeks, something that was not dread. Relief, small, tentative, but real. It is over. My daughter is safe. I am safe. She was wrong. The call came 4 days later. 7:30 in this morning. "Claire?" David's voice was different, tight, controlled in the way that means something has gone wrong. "I need you to come to my office." She knew before she arrived. Rachel Webb had recanted. "She called me last night," David said. He sat with his hands flat on the desk. The posture of a man delivering news he cannot cushion. She said her statement was exaggerated, that she felt pressured. She has retained new legal counsel. He slid a document across the desk. "Colin's attorney filed a counter motion this morning. They are arguing that you have been engaged in a coordinated campaign of harassment against your husband, motivated by what they are calling paranoid ideation exacerbated by prenatal hormonal disruption." Claire stared at the phrase. He had taken the behavior log, the weapon he had built against her, and was now using it as a shield. "They are filing for emergency sole custody," David continued, "on the grounds that your mental state poses a risk to the child." The room tilted. With Rachel's recantation, we have lost our strongest corroborating witness, David said. We still have the financial evidence. The forgery referral is moving through federal channels. But the custody motion operates in family court, and family court judges are conservative. We are not defeated, but we are not where we were 4 days ago. Claire drove to her OBGYN appointment in silence. Dr. Ellen Crawford frowned at the blood pressure monitor before she said a single word. 162/99, the nurse read. Dr. Crawford removed the cuff. "Claire, your blood pressure is in a range that places both you and your baby at serious risk. I am putting you on modified bed rest, and I want to see you every 72 hours. She leaned forward. "Whatever is happening in your life, your body is keeping score. Stress hormones cross the placental barrier. Your daughter feels what you feel. I need the source of your stress removed today. Not tomorrow. Today. Your body keeps a record that your mind sometimes tries to ignore. When you are in crisis, a betrayal, a legal battle, a financial attack, your nervous system responds as if you are being physically threatened, because in many ways you are. Sustained high stress impacts your immune function, your cardiovascular health, and in pregnancy, your baby's development. This is not weakness, this is biology. And protecting your physical health in a crisis is not a luxury. It is a strategy. That evening, a FedEx package arrived at her parents' house. No return address. Inside, photographs. Colin and Rachel at restaurants. In a car. Walking into a hotel. Intimate, unmistakable. Each one time-stamped. At the bottom of the stack, a typed note on plain white paper. He does not deserve you. Everything you need is here. A friend. Claire spread the photos on her father's kitchen table, turned the note over. Blank. Who had sent this? Before she could begin to answer that question, the 3 catastrophic events arrived in quick succession, each one worse than the last, each one designed to destroy something different. Walter received the first call on a Wednesday morning. He came to find Claire at the Foundation's office, where she had been working on literacy program reports. He appeared in the doorway and said simply, "Come with me." His voice was level, but his jaw was set. They sat in David Peterson's office 40 minutes later. "Victor Crane's operation is larger than we understood," David said. "He has filed a claim this morning against the Hargrove Family Trust for $300,000 plus accrued interest. His attorneys are arguing that the forged co-guarantee is valid and enforceable." Walter's hand stopped halfway to his coffee cup. "The trust holds the capital for the Children's Literacy Wing construction," David said. "If this claim succeeds, or even ties up the trust in litigation for 6 months, the wing cannot break ground. 4,000 children. The reading program Claire had spent 2 years building. The hospital wing bearing her family's name, all of it held hostage by a forged signature on a predatory loan. The second blow came 20 minutes later. David's assistant slipped a note through the door. David read it, set it on the table. Colin's attorney filed an amended motion while we have been sitting here. He turned the note toward Claire. He is requesting that you be compelled to submit to a psychiatric evaluation before the custody hearing. He is citing the behavior log and additionally claiming that your recent actions, removing personal assets from the joint account, hiring separate legal counsel, consulting a forensic accountant, demonstrate calculated malicious intent consistent with a personality disorder. Claire stared at the words. Every rational, protective action she had taken had been reframed as evidence of instability. Every smart decision had been weaponized against her. She had done everything right, and he had turned every right thing into ammunition. This tactic appears in high-conflict situations with disturbing frequency. When someone cannot attack your actual character, they attempt to pathologize your behavior. Seeking legal counsel becomes paranoid. Protecting your finances becomes malicious. Consulting professionals becomes calculated. If you are ever in a situation like this, document your reasoning for every action you take. Write it down, date it, have an attorney timestamp it, because the story of why you did something matters as much as what you did. The third blow arrived as Walter's phone rang. He looked at the screen, stood and walked to the corner of the room. When he returned, something behind his eyes had shifted. "That was my CFO," he said. "This morning, an anonymous financial disclosure was filed with the Connecticut Securities Commission, alleging that the Hargrove Foundation has been commingling charitable funds with private real estate investments." He paused. "The allegations are false. We will prove that. But the investigation will take months. The Foundation's accounts are frozen during the review." The room went completely silent. 3 simultaneous strikes. Victor Crane attacking the family trust. The psychiatric evaluation motion threatening to take Claire's child's daughter. The Foundation under false investigation. Its capital frozen, its construction halted. Claire sat very still in her chair. She thought about the nursery, the pale yellow walls, the rocking chair, the mobile, of silver stars. The stuffed bear on the dresser that she had bought the day she finally, after 2 years of trying and 2 losses, saw 2 lines on a test. She thought about 4,000 children who needed a literacy program, that needed a wing, that needed money, that was now frozen. She thought about Colin, in a hotel room somewhere, eating room service. Believing he had won, she placed both hands flat on the conference table. "What is your plan?" she asked her father. Walter looked at her for a long moment. "These 3 attacks were not random," he said. "They were coordinated, which means they came from one source." He looked at David. "Find the connection between Crane, the securities complaint, and Colin's legal strategy. Find me who is pulling the strings." David nodded slowly. "I already have a theory." Before David could pursue his theory, something else arrived. He called Claire 2 days after the triple catastrophe, his voice carrying a different quality than it had in weeks. Not tight, not careful, but genuinely surprised. "We have identified the source of the anonymous photographs." Claire set down her tea. "The private investigator who took them is licensed in Ohio. His client paid by personal check." A pause. "The checks were drawn on an account belonging to a Robert Mercer." Claire's breath stopped. "Colin's father," David confirmed. "Robert Mercer, the man Claire had met exactly 4 times, a retired high school football coach from Dayton, Ohio. Flannel shirts, work boots, a man who shook hands too hard and called everyone pal, and had teared up quietly when Claire told him she was pregnant, turning away quickly so she would not see. He had hired a private investigator out of his own savings. He had been building this file for 3 months. Claire called Robert that evening from the porch of her parents' estate. The air was cool and clean. The oak trees were beginning their slow turn to gold. "I got your photographs, Robert." Silence. Then a sound she had not expected. A grown man crying. Not dramatically, quietly. The way men of his generation cry. Reluctant, ashamed of the tears, even as they fall. "I raised him better than this," Robert said, his voice unsteady. "Or I thought I did." He told her about the previous spring. Colin had brought Rachel to a family barbecue in Dayton, introduced her as a colleague. "I saw how he looked at her," Robert said. "I recognized it. I had seen it before in men who had forgotten what they had at home. And I knew my son was on the wrong road." He paused, cleared his throat. "His mother left when he was 11. Just packed up one Saturday and was gone. I raised that boy alone. Worked doubles to keep the lights on. Drove him to every practice. Sat in the front row at every game. I thought I had given him everything he needed to be a decent man." His voice cracked. "I was wrong. Or maybe he just chose different." He had used the money he had been saving for a new water heater. The water heater could wait. "If you need me to testify," Robert said, "in court, under oath, against my own son, I will do it. For my grandchild." Claire pressed her palm to her chest. She could feel her own heartbeat. Strong, steady. "You did not have to do this," she said. "Yes, I did," Robert said simply. "Someone had to be the man my son refused to be." After she hung up, Claire sat on the porch for a long time. The sky was the particular shade of deep blue that comes just before full dark. The first stars were appearing. She thought about what it cost a man on a retired coach's pension to hire a private investigator for 3 months. She thought about what it meant that he had done it anyway. Not for Colin, not for the Hargrove name, not for any reward he could expect. Just because a woman carrying his grandchild deserved to know the truth. Just because it was right. Sometimes the people who show up for you are not the ones you expected. Sometimes the most important act of loyalty in your life comes from someone with no obligation to perform it. Pay attention to those people. They are telling you something about what character actually looks like. David Peterson's theory took 6 days to confirm. He came to the Hargrove estate on a Sunday morning and spread the documents across Walter's dining room table while Claire and Walter sat across from him. Morning light fell through the tall windows. Coffee steamed in 3 mugs. The grandfather clock ticked from the hallway. The securities complaint was filed anonymously, David said, but it contained a procedural error, a specific misuse of a regulatory form number. My investigator recognized it. The same error appeared in a complaint filed 3 years ago against a family in Westport. He set a photograph on the table. That earlier complaint was orchestrated by an attorney named Lawrence Pruitt. Neither Claire nor Walter spoke. Lawrence Pruitt has represented Victor Crane in 4 of his previous asset seizure cases. Pruitt and Crane operate as a coordinated system. Pruitt identifies targets. Crane provides the financing. Together, they have pursued claims against 7 Connecticut families in the past 11 years. David paused. 3 cases settled quietly. The other 4 are still in litigation. And Colin, Claire said, Lawrence Pruitt was Colin's original legal mentor. Colin trained at Pruitt's firm before his lateral transfer to Hartford 7 years ago. David looked at her steadily. Your husband did not find Crane. Crane, through Pruitt, found your husband. They identified him as a vehicle, a man with expensive tastes, significant personal debt, and access to Hargrove wealth. They cultivated him over years, offered him the loan, coached his legal strategy, probably facilitated the approach to Rachel as well. Claire absorbed this. Colin did not initiate this, she said slowly. No. But he chose to participate. He chose to forge your signature. He chose to document your behavior. He chose to pursue the custody strategy. Every choice he made freely. David's voice was clear. He is not innocent. But he is also not the architect. Pruitt is, Walter said. Yes. Walter looked at the name on David's report for a long moment. Something moved across his face. Not surprise exactly, but recognition. Lawrence Pruitt, Walter said quietly. He made a business approach to me 12 years ago, a development partnership. I declined. He did not take it well. Walter folded his hands. Apparently, he has a very long memory. Claire looked at her father. What do we do? Walter reached into his jacket pocket and placed something on the table between them, a USB drive. 3 years ago, Walter said, I had a security concern at one of my development sites. I hired a firm to conduct a quiet investigation. In the course of that work, they came across something unrelated to my situation. Financial communications between Pruitt and Crane that documented their methodology. The investigator flagged it for me to hold. He looked at the USB drive. At the time, I did not understand why it might one day be useful. He looked up at Claire. I understand now. David picked up the USB drive, turned it over in his hand. This, combined with everything we already have, the forgery evidence, the forensic accounting, the behavior log, Robert Mercer's photographs, Rachel Webb's reinstated statement, he set the drive down. We do not just have a divorce case. We have a federal prosecution. Walter nodded once. Move everything forward, he said. I want it ready for the foundation gala, 2 weeks from Saturday. Claire looked at her father. You want to do this at the gala? Men like Pruitt, men like Coulin, their power exists only in the shadows. Walter's voice was quiet and final. Drag them into the light, and they have nothing. The morning of the second gala, 3 things happened before 9 o'clock. The federal prosecutor's office called to confirm that Lawrence Pruitt had been taken into custody the previous evening. His offices were under warrant. Victor Crane's operation had been frozen. The false securities complaint against the Hargrove Foundation had been formally withdrawn, and the foundation's accounts were released. David called to say that the family court judge had reviewed Colin's psychiatric evaluation motion and denied it, citing the behavior log as, in her written words, inconsistent with credible documentation and consistent with deliberate fabrication. And Rachel Webb, no longer under Pruitt's sphere of influence, resubmitted her original statement in full, notarized and delivered to David's office by hand. Claire stood in her parents' kitchen in a cream-colored gown, empire waist, floor length, elegant, entirely hers, and felt something she had not felt in weeks. She felt safe. Her mother appeared in the doorway, dressed in charcoal silk, carrying a jewelry box. "Sit down," Diane said. "I have something for you." She clasped a diamond necklace around Claire's throat, a cascade of small stones that caught the light like captured starlight. "This was my mother's," Diane said quietly. "She wore it the day she told my father she was done being small for his benefit. The day she decided that her own life was worth living fully." She met Claire's eyes in the hallway mirror. "Prescott women, Hargrove women, do not break, darling. We transform." Claire touched the necklace. Walter appeared in the doorway behind them. He looked at his daughter for a long moment. The cream gown, the diamond necklace, the 7 months pregnant woman who had spent the last 3 weeks being systematically dismantled and had somehow come out of it, standing straighter than when she went in. "Ready?" he said. "Yes," Claire said. She was right, that it would be a wonderful night. She just did not yet know about the final twist waiting for her at the end of it. The Grand Monarch Hotel? The same ballroom, crystal chandeliers, white roses, 600 guests tonight. Walter had expanded the list. He wanted witnesses. Claire walked in with her head high and her hand on her belly. The baby kicked twice in quick succession, as if to say, "I am ready." "So am I, little one. So am I." Colin arrived at 7:15. His attorney had not yet reached him about Pruitt's arrest. He walked in wearing his best suit and his most confident smile, looking like a man who believed the board was arranged in his favor. He kissed Claire's cheek, placed his hand on her belly for the photographer. "You look incredible," he said, and for a moment he almost sounded sincere, as if some fragment of the man she had once loved was surfacing briefly before the tide pulled it back under. "Thank you," Claire said. "It is going to be a wonderful night." Walter took the stage at 7:45. He moved the way he always moved, unhurried, certain, the particular authority of a man who has never once needed to prove himself to a room. He spoke for 8 minutes about the foundation's work, the impact numbers, the children served, the program Claire had built from nothing, which had now reached 4,200 children across the state. Then he set down his notes, removed his reading glasses. 600 people leaned forward. "Before we continue," Walter said, "I would like to share something personal." Silence. Complete and attentive. 4 weeks ago, and this very event, in this very room, my son-in-law stood at this podium and called my daughter worthless. The word landed the same way it had the first time. Heavy. Sharp. Wrong. I want to tell you tonight what worthless actually looks like. He pressed a button. The projection screen behind him lit up. "Worthless," Walter said, "is forging your pregnant wife's signature on a $300,000 loan from a predatory lender." The forged co-guarantee filled the screen, Charlotte's name in that wrong, angular C, the handwriting expert's annotations in red. Colin stood up. His chair scraped the marble floor. "Now wait," Walter continued without pausing. Worthless is siphoning $79,000 from your joint household account while your wife carries your child. The spreadsheet, 97 transfers, dates, amounts. Worthless is fabricating a psychiatric narrative about your pregnant wife's emotional responses, documenting her tears, her fears, her sleepless nights, to manufacture a custody case against her. The behavior log appeared, Colin's own words, his own clinical observations of a woman he had made cry, and then written it down as evidence. The room had gone completely silent. And worthless, Walter said, his voice dropping lower, quieter, more devastating for its very softness, is being recruited by a criminal enterprise to defraud your wife's family, and being too greedy and too small to realize you were never the predator in this story. You were the instrument. He paused. Lawrence Pruitt was arrested last night on federal charges of wire fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. His associate, Victor Crane, faces the same charges. Your name, Colin, appears throughout Pruitt's files as a cooperating participant. Walter straightened to his full height. My daughter did not marry a villain. She married a weak man who was handed a script by an actual villain and chose to read every word of it. She is done with that story, and so are we. The service door opened. A man in a dark suit stepped forward. Colin James Mercer, I am United States Marshal Brian Cole. I am serving you with a petition for divorce, a temporary restraining order, and a federal summons to appear before the district court on charges of forgery, wire fraud, and conspiracy. Colin took the papers. His hands shook so badly the documents rattled audibly in the silence. Then, from somewhere near the back of the room, a single person began to clap. Then another. And another. By the time Colin was escorted through the service exit, the applause was thunderous. Claire later learned that the first person to applaud was a 71-year-old retired family court judge named Margaret Calloway, who had been divorced twice and told anyone who would listen that she had attended hundreds of charity galas, and this was the first one that had ever given her genuine satisfaction. 1 week later. October. The oak trees on the Hargrove estate had turned fully gold. Colin was gone, not metaphorically, but physically, legally, completely. Removed from the brownstone by court order within 24 hours of the gala. His belongings, the suits and the watches and the cologne that no longer smelled like her husband but like someone else's story, had been packed and sent to a storage unit. The guest room he had chosen to sleep in was empty. Claire had repainted it a soft sage green. She was calling it her reading room. It had good morning light. He was staying at an extended stay hotel off the highway. Rachel Webb had transferred to a branch office in another state within 48 hours of the gala. It turned out that Mrs. Aldridge by Christmas had a very different timeline when Mrs. Aldridge did not come with family billions attached. Colin's firm had terminated him within 48 hours of the fraud charges becoming public. Financial services firms do not keep employees who forge signatures. It is bad for the brand. Victor Crane's operation was under full federal investigation. 7 other families, 7 other forged documents. The prosecutors were working through each case. Garrett was not grateful for their attention, but he had provided, through his own recklessness, the thread that unraveled the entire network. Claire sat on the back porch in an oversized sweater, feet up, a mug of decaf growing warm in her hands. The morning was cold and bright and honest, the way October mornings are when summer has finally stopped pretending. Her phone buzzed. A text from Sophie. Can I come over? I brought the good ones from Carlucci's, the ones with the custard. Claire looked at the message for a long moment. The pastries from Carlucci's on Fifth, the ones that deposited powdered sugar on your fingers and your shirt and somehow your left eyebrow, regardless of how carefully you ate them. Claire had once eaten 3 in a row and told Sophie she felt no remorse whatsoever. Sophie had said, "That is genuinely the most self-actualized statement you have ever made." Claire typed back, "Come." They sat on the porch together, not talking about Colin for the first 20 minutes, talking about Sophie's sister's catastrophically misguided attempt to assemble flat-pack furniture without the instructions, about the new Thai place that had allegedly given someone's husband food poisoning, about nothing. And it was the best conversation Claire had experienced in months. Then the natural silence came, the kind that settles between two people who have something real to discuss and are gathering the courage. "I am not ready to call you my best friend again," Claire said. "Not yet. What you did hurt. The 2 months, I understand why. I even believe you thought you were protecting me. But understanding and trusting are different things, and trust is going to take time." Sophie nodded. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were not. "I am ready to call you my friend," Claire said, "and I am ready to try to build from there." Sophie pressed her lips together, nodded again. Claire pushed the pastry box across the table. Sophie took one. They sat in the October sun with powdered sugar on their fingers and said nothing else for a while. That was enough for now. Robert Mercer drove 14 hours and arrived 3 days later. He stood on the porch, holding a paper bag and wearing his nicest flannel shirt. Claire guessed this because it was flannel but also clearly ironed, which required a specific kind of effort. His work boots were polished. Inside the bag, a container of homemade chicken soup and a hand-knitted baby blanket. Cream-colored, soft, from decades of careful storage. "My mother made this before she passed," Robert said. He held the blanket in both hands. "She never got to give it to anyone. It was always meant for a grandchild. It was always meant for this." He set it on the kitchen table between them. "Colin does not get to ruin that too." Claire held the blanket, pressed it to her face. It smelled like cedar and wool and a woman she would never meet, but somehow, through this blanket, already knew a little. "You drove 14 hours, she said. 14 and a half. There was construction outside of Scranton." Robert sat down across from her. "I also want you to know, I have spoken to David Peterson. I will testify, whatever is needed, under oath, against my own son, for my grandchild." His voice was steady. Some things matter more than blood. Claire reached across the table and put her hand over his. His knuckles were rough from 40 years of work. His eyes were kind. "Thank you, Robert," she said, "for everything." He shook his head. "You do not thank family for doing what is right." 2 months after the gala, David Peterson called. "Claire, I have something to tell you." A pause. The particular pause of a man choosing his words with surgical care. The USB drive your father provided to the federal prosecutor. The evidence against Lawrence Pruitt. The prosecutor's office has reviewed its origins thoroughly, and they need to speak with you. Claire arrived at David's office the following morning. The federal prosecutor, a woman named Janet Forsyth, sat across from her, composed, professional, carrying something in her expression that Claire could not quite read. "Ms. Hargrove," Forsyth said, "the evidence on that USB drive was obtained 3 years ago by a private security firm your father hired. The chain of custody is clean. The evidence is fully admissible." She folded her hands on the table. "What we want you to understand is the complete picture." She placed a photograph on the table. Claire looked at it. Her father, Walter Hargrove, standing outside a restaurant, Café Laurent. 3 years ago, in conversation with a man Claire did not recognize. "That man," Forsyth said, "is Lawrence Pruitt." Claire looked up. "Your father met with Pruitt 3 years ago," Forsyth continued. "At the time, Pruitt presented what appeared to be a legitimate business proposition. Your father declined, but the meeting made him suspicious. Something about Pruitt's methodology, the way he spoke about other families, about leveraging relationships, about accessing wealth through proximity, raised a concern your father could not ignore." She set another document on the table. "Your father hired the security firm immediately after that meeting, not because he had evidence of wrongdoing, but because he sensed something was wrong and wanted to be prepared. In the course of their investigation, they obtained the communications between Pruitt and Crane that are now central to the federal prosecution." Forsyth looked at Claire steadily. "Your father has known about Pruitt's operation for 3 years. He did not know Pruitt would target his family through Colin, but when it happened—" She paused. "He was ready. The USB drive has been in his possession since the investigation concluded. He has been waiting for the moment it would be needed." Claire sat very still. "He never told me," she said. "No," Forsyth said. "I asked him about that specifically. He said—" She glanced at her notes. "My daughter needed to fight her own battle. I just needed to make sure the cavalry was already in position." Claire drove to her parents' estate. She walked through the kitchen, past the front hallway, to her father's study. The door was open. Walter sat at his mahogany desk, reading in the leather chair that had held his shape for 30 years. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked its steady, patient rhythm. Afternoon light fell through the tall windows and painted long gold rectangles across the floor. He looked up when she entered, set down his glasses, said nothing. She sat in the leather chair across from his desk, the one she had been sitting in since she was 5 years old. Her feet used to dangle. Now they touched the floor, but the feeling was the same. Safety. The smell of old books. The sound of that clock. They looked at each other. "You knew," she said. "I knew Pruitt was dangerous," Walter said. "I knew his methodology. I did not know he had already recruited Colin when I sat across from him in that restaurant 3 years ago. I did not know he had identified your marriage as his entry point." He paused. "When it became clear what was happening, I understood what I was looking at, and I was grateful, if that is the right word, that I had been paying attention." "You were ready," Claire said. "I try to be," he said, "for the things I can see coming." He was quiet for a moment. "The things I cannot see coming. The cruelty of the Gala, the behavior log, the way he made you doubt yourself. Those were yours to survive. And you survived them. More than survived." He looked at her. "You won. We won," Claire said. Walter shook his head slightly. "I provided the foundation and the cavalry. You fought the actual battle." He leaned forward. "There is a difference, Claire, and you need to know which one you are." The grandfather clock ticked between them. "She has your eyes," Walter said. "Your daughter." "I was looking at the ultrasound photo your mother pinned to the refrigerator." Claire smiled. "She is not here yet." "No, but she is almost ready." He folded his hands. "When she arrives, she needs to know what her mother is made of. Not the story of the Gala, not the legal victory, not any of the dramatic details. Just the simple fact, when everything was designed to break her, her mother refused to break." Claire looked at her father. At his steady eyes, his folded hands, the clock behind him that he had moved to her nursery, and then apparently moved back, the clock that had counted the seconds of her whole life, the clock that had ticked through her childhood, and her mistakes and her losses, and this. "I have a question," she said. Ask. The clock. You had it moved to the nursery, and now it is back here. Walter glanced at it. The smallest smile crossed his face. I had a second clock made. Your nursery clock is a duplicate. Same maker, same movement, same sound. He looked back at her. I wanted your daughter to grow up with that sound, the same sound you grew up with. He paused. Every Hargrove needs a clock. Reminds you that the worst hours end, that time passes, that the best ones are always coming. Claire sat with that for a moment. Then, because she was 31 years old and 7 months pregnant, and had just survived 3 weeks of coordinated destruction and emerged standing, she started to cry. Not the shocked, airless tears of the Gala bathroom. Real tears. The kind that means something is finally over. The kind that happen when the body finally believes what the mind has been trying to accept. Walter did not move from his chair, did not reach across the desk, did not say anything. He just waited, the way he had always waited, with that particular patience of a man who understood that some things cannot be rushed and should not be. After a moment, Claire wiped her eyes, straightened in the chair. I need to write her a letter, Claire said. I know, Walter said. Before she gets here, while I still remember what this felt like. Write it tonight, he said. While it is fresh, she will want to know someday, not the facts, not the legal details. She will want to know how you felt when you were sitting on that bathroom floor, and how you felt when you decided to get up. Claire nodded. She stood, smoothed her gown, touched the diamond necklace at her throat. Dad? Walter looked at her. Thank you. Not for the cavalry. She held his gaze. For teaching me to be the kind of person who could fight the battle herself. Walter was quiet for a moment. You did that, he said finally. I just paid attention. Claire's daughter was born on November 3rd at 6:22 in the morning, 7 pounds, 4 ounces, a full head of dark hair. The loudest cry Dr. Crawford had heard from a newborn in 20 years of practice. And she said this with something very close to admiration. Walter cried in the hallway. He did not think anyone saw. Claire's mother told Claire about it later with the particular tenderness of a woman who has been married to a strong man for a long time and knows exactly what his tears mean. Diane held Claire's hand through the whole labor and said, at the peak of a particularly forceful contraction, "You are doing magnificently, you absolute ship in full sail." Claire laughed so hard that Dr. Crawford had to ask the room to please maintain a professional atmosphere. Robert Mercer arrived 4 hours after the birth, still in his road clothes, carrying a thermal bag from a diner off the highway. Inside, 2 containers of chicken soup, one for Claire, or one for Diane, who he had decided deserved it on principle. He stood at the edge of the hospital room and looked at the baby in the crib, small, dark-haired, already frowning slightly at the overhead light as if she had opinions about the ambiance. She looks like a Hargrove, he said. She is a Hargrove, Claire said. Robert nodded slowly. He set the cream-colored baby blanket in the crib, tucking it around her with the careful hands of a man who had coached young people his whole life and understood that gentleness is not the opposite of strength. Welcome to the family, little one, he said quietly. Jane, that night, after the visitors had gone, and the room was quiet, and the baby slept in her crib with the cream blanket around her, Claire took out a sheet of paper and a pen from her bag. Not her phone, not a tablet. Paper and pen, because some things need to be written by hand, in ink, so they cannot be deleted. The pen scratched against the paper. The hospital room hummed softly. Moonlight came through the window, Dear little one, she wrote. Her handwriting was steady, clear. By the time you read this, you will know the story. Some version of it, anyway. The version I tell you will leave out the worst parts and keep the best ones. That is not dishonesty. That is motherhood. Choosing which truths to share and which ones to carry alone until you are old enough to hold them. Here is what I want you to know right now, before you are old enough to understand any of the rest. Your mother was called worthless by the man who is supposed to love her most. In a room full of people, in front of chandeliers and champagne and everyone she knew. And instead of believing him, she became the most valuable person in her own story. Not because of her father's money, not because of lawyers or forensic accountants or federal prosecutors, though all of those mattered, but because she sat on a cold bathroom floor at a charity gala at 7 months pregnant and decided, quietly, alone, with her hand on her belly and your little kicks against her palm, that one person's cruelty was not going to be the last word about who she was. That decision, that single, unremarkable, life-altering decision, that is the inheritance I am leaving you. Not the trust fund, not the foundation, not the Hargrove name, the decision. You come from women who transform. Your grandmother, who clasped a diamond necklace around my throat the night I needed it most and told me I was a ship in full sail. Your great-grandmother, who wore that same necklace the day she chose her own life over someone else's comfort. And you come from a good man who is not your grandfather by blood, a retired football coach from Ohio, who drove 14 hours and spent his savings and offered to testify against his own son. Because some people understand that doing the right thing is not optional. Remember him. The blood does not always matter. The character always does. Here is my wish for you, little one. Not that life will not knock you down. It will. Everyone gets knocked down. My wish is that when it does, you remember who you are before you decide what to do next. That you sit in the quiet for as long as you need. That you find the one small thing you can control and make it perfect. That you wait until you know everything before you act. And that when you finally act, you do it with the particular calmness of a woman who has already decided how this ends. You are a Hargrove, which means you fall down, and then you get back up. I love you more than I have words for. I will see you in the morning. Your mother Claire folded the letter into thirds, tucked it into the pocket of the stuffed bear on the windowsill. The gray one. The soft one. The one she had bought the day she finally saw 2 lines on a test after 2 years of hoping and 2 losses and all the nights she had stopped believing it would ever happen. She looked at her daughter sleeping in the lamplight, small and whole, and entirely unaware of everything that had been broken and rebuilt to bring her safely into the world. Worthless. The word had seemed so permanent 3 weeks ago, so final, so true. The kind of word that takes up residence in the space between your ribs and whispers at 3 in the morning. But here is what Claire knew now, what she wanted every woman who had ever been handed a word like that to understand. Words are only as permanent as you allow them to be. Someone else's assessment of your value is not a fact. It is a projection. It is the sound of a person who cannot see your worth because they have none of their own to measure it against. When someone calls you worthless, they are not describing you. They are describing the size of their own vision. And the most powerful thing, the single most transformative act available to any woman in any room, in any circumstance, is simply to refuse to see yourself through eyes that small. You are not what you were called. You are what you decided to become after. The clock on the nightstand ticked, steady, patient, reliable. The same sound that had filled her father's study her whole life. The same sound she had grown up falling asleep to. The same sound her daughter would now grow up falling asleep to in her pale yellow nursery with the mobile of silver stars. Some sounds mean safety. This was one of them. The baby stirred. A small, searching sound. Claire stood up from her chair, lifted her daughter from the crib, settled her against her chest. The baby quieted immediately. Two hearts, beating in the same rhythm, the way they had been for 8 months, the way they would be, in some form, for the rest of their lives. Outside the window, Hartford spread itself in the dark, the lights of the city carrying on, as cities do, regardless of what has broken or healed within them. Somewhere out there, Colin was in a hotel room. Somewhere, Pruitt was processing an arrest. Somewhere, the Foundation's accounts were unfrozen, and the children's literacy wing was waiting to break ground in the spring. And here, in this room, in this light, in this quiet, a woman who had been called worthless held her daughter and knew, with a clarity that had nothing to do with courtrooms or credit card statements or chandeliers, exactly what she was worth. Everything. She had always been worth everything. She had just needed 3 very bad weeks, 1 cold bathroom floor, and the particular grace of a father who knew how to be ready to finally believe it. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver stories with genuine emotional value and real-life lessons. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.